What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 326 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about X-Men 92, Volume 1, The World is a Vampire. This collects the first 5 issues of the ongoing X-Men 92 series. Yesterday, I made the mistake of saying that Volume 0, War Zones, was part of the ongoing X-Men 92 series. I was mistaken. That was a 4-issue miniseries that acts as a prequel to the ongoing series. And the story here is that the X-Men come into conflict with a vampiric super soldier from Russia called Alpha Red, and he is trying to bring vampires back to the forefront, make them more powerful, and basically cut out the mutants as the evolutionary successors to humankind. And I like this story okay. I don't like this as much as I liked Volume 0. I think there's a couple different reasons for that. Number one, there were 2 epilogues at the end of Volume 0 that I was very interested in seeing followed through in this volume, and this volume pretty much ignores both of those epilogues. There's one of them that is completely ignored, and then there's another one that is mentioned a little bit in the last issue of this book. The last issue here has Scott and Jean on a time travel adventure where they go to the far future and they meet members of the Ascani cult. The second epilogue from Volume 0 is kind of mentioned a little bit there, but it's not followed through nearly as much as I would have liked. I was very interested in seeing where this series was going to take those 2 epilogues that we saw at the end of Volume 0, and ultimately this volume pretty much ignores both of them. So I was a little disappointed in that, but maybe we will get to see those followed up in Volume 2. Maybe. I hope so. And the other reason that I didn't like this volume as much as I liked Volume 0 is I've never been a huge fan of X-Men fighting vampires. I like vampires. I like X-Men. I don't necessarily have to see these 2 things merged into one story. And there is precedent for this in other stories. At least twice in Chris Claremont's X-Men run in the 80s, we got to see the X-Men fight Dracula, and that's referenced here. Storm goes to Dracula for help in fighting Alpha Red. So that is a thing that happened in the 80s, and usually I am a really big fan of Chris Claremont's X-Men run, but I don't have to see Dracula and the world of vampires being mixed in with the Marvel Universe. And I know that's been done in other stories by creators who are much, much smarter than I am. In Doctor Strange in the late 70s, early 80s, we got to see Dracula mixed in a little bit. Tomb of Dracula, which introduced Blade, and he is a viable part of the Marvel Universe now. Then you also have Morbius the Living Vampire, introduced in Spider-Man. So there is a lot of vampiric stuff in the main Marvel Universe. So that's not to say that I don't like all that stuff, but I would prefer that it kind of stays over in its own corner of the Marvel Universe, and then we keep the superhero stuff over on this side. I don't really want to see X-Men fighting vampires as a prolonged story. At least when it happened in Chris Claremont's X-Men run, it was a 1-issue thing and then another 1-issue thing. It wasn't a long, drawn-out storyline like it is here. And it's only a 4-issue storyline here. It's not like it's some huge summer event like Secret Wars or something like that. It's just a 4-issue story, but still, if I had to choose between X-Men fighting a Russian super soldier vampire or following up on those epilogues at the end of Volume 0, I would have rather seen those epilogues at the end of Volume 0. But the story here is not bad. It is told very well, even though it's not something that I necessarily wanted to see. I like some of the revelations about Alpha Red, who is the vampire that they're fighting here. I like the way that they kind of give his backstory slowly. At first, they're telling you that it's one thing, and then later they tell you more, and it doesn't contradict what they told you earlier, but it does put what they told you earlier into a new light. So I really like the revelations about him. I like how they made that work. They're basically just redoing that X-Men versus Vampires storyline from like 2011, I think. They're basically just redoing that in the context of the X-Men 90s universe that we've got going on here. So I like that quite a bit. And then the last issue of this book is Scott and Jean in Alaska trying to take a break from the X-Men. As we saw at the end of Volume 1, Scott wants to try and go on a vision of self-discovery, I guess you could say, try and figure out who he is outside of the X-Men, and Jean is with him. And then we get to see a little bit of a time travel mess around going on there. And this basically is cementing stuff that we already knew about the Ascani cult from the X-Men universe, Cable, Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse. This is all that kind of stuff. And it's basically the same as how it was given to us in the main Marvel Marvel Universe. A lot of stuff here that I feel like could have been given to us in a very different way is pretty much given to us in the same way. And it just depends on if you like that stuff from the main Marvel Universe, on if you're going to like this issue. In Volume 0, we had Cassandra Nova introduced, and she was an entirely different character than she was in the main Marvel Universe, and I like that about that volume. I like that we had the same character, but she had a different origin, different motivations, and all around, she was just a different kind of character. I like that quite a bit, and I like the idea of, in this alternate universe, we can take things that we think we know and then turn them on their head a little bit and make them just different enough where they're still recognizable, but they're also new. And they ultimately didn't do that with a lot of these elements here. They basically just played it exactly the way that it played in the main Marvel Universe. For example, I'll just go ahead and spoil this one slightly, the origin of Cable. His origin is given to us here, and it's basically the same as what it was in the main Marvel Universe, with a few minor twists and turns. For example, there's one character who is involved with the origin of Cable who wasn't involved in the main Marvel Universe, but overall it's like 80% the same origin, and I would have been fine with them playing around with it a little bit more, making it a little bit more new and a little bit less stuff that we've seen before. On the back of the book, this says about this whole series, totally 90s but totally new, or something like that, and more or less I still agree with that sentiment. I really like all the new stuff that they're doing here, while also recreating the feel that the X-Men comics had in the early 90s, but with this particular issue, I would have been fine with them maybe making it a little bit more new and a little bit less, hey, I've seen all this before. Overall, I did not hate this volume. I liked it quite a bit, but I did not like it as much as Volume 0. But maybe it would have been impossible to have followed up on how much I love Volume 0. I thought that volume was just about perfect, so maybe it would have been very difficult to have done a follow-up volume to that. But overall, I think this is still a very solid book. I liked it quite a bit. I'm still very much looking forward to what Volume 2 is going to bring us, so I guess we will see what happens there tomorrow. We'll be talking about that volume tomorrow. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.